And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, for the second half of the show, third segment. We are fully displaying our certificates of ignorance in here on this very wide-ranging and detailed topic of UFO sightings throughout history and our interactions with them and the government and public and media response to the reports. And we're joined by Marty, who is Overkill in the Discord. And he's given us some great data. So where were we at? I lost track of where we were at. We had a long break there.
Well, you made reference to General Stanford's press conference, and the one most people probably are familiar with that. It was pretty highly publicized, where he stated that they've been able to explain sightings as hoaxes, erroneously identified friendly aircraft, meteorological or electronic phenomena, or light aberrations. He did, however, concede that there have been a remaining percentage of this total, about 20%, of reports that come from credible observers of relatively incredible things.
Yeah.
That statement was soon put into scrutiny, or under scrutiny. The Air Force, shortly after that, hired a very prestigious organization called the Battelle Memorial Institute out of Columbus, Ohio. They were hired to do a top-secret independent statistical analysis of 2,199 cases that had been collected by the Air Force between June 1st, 1947 and December 31st, 1952. This was called Project Stork. Battelle had a panel of scientists, and they took these reports. The first thing they did is they separated them by the quality, what they considered the quality of the report. They divided them as excellent, good, doubtful, and poor. They then categorized what they determined were the likely explanations for these. But the way they did it is they created individual panels. One panel would create an evaluation of the report, and then there was an identification panel that was separate that would determine what they felt that was. If those things agreed, then the sighting would be placed under that category. And they had categories like balloons, astronomical, aircraft, light phenomena, birds, clouds, psychological, unknown, and other. They also had a category specifically called insufficient information. If a sighting was determined to be unknown, or if the panels did not agree on the explanation for a specific sighting, those sightings went before the entire all the members, and there had to be unanimous agreement as to what that explanation was.
Yeah.
So the 33% that fell under unexplained were not the cases for which there was insufficient information.
Or the poor reports.
Right. These were the best sightings. And those sightings that fell under that were the ones that were made at close range by high-quality observers that were qualified. So it was the cream of the crop.
Yeah.
What was the percentage?
Actually, if you extract out the ones that were not of the highest caliber, you can bring the percentage down to 23%. It depends on how you look at the statistics.
Okay. Yeah.
You know how statistics
play games with statistics.
Right. You can make numbers look like whatever. Right. But bottom line, the cases that were listed as unknowns that were high quality reports, it was 23% of the reports. So, interestingly, of that, contrary to General Stanford's statement that most cases could be explained as hoaxes or psychological, well, Battelle found that only 2% of the cases could be attributed to either psychological or hoaxes. So
Stanford was going on. He was basing his on the Air Force people rather than this particular. That's what you're saying. This happened after that.
No, yes, this was after Stanford's statement.
Okay, yeah.
So it contradicted, Stanford's statement.
Right, but his statement must have been based on. It wasn't Blue Book yet. It was something else, right?
It was still Grudge.
Still
at that
Grudge,
point,
yeah.
right.
So, but even Grudge was having to say that 20% of the cases were unexplained.
Grudge, right? Grudge's report was, I think, their percentage of unexplained were slightly higher, but Bethel was, well, first of all, but the Project Stork was top secret, but the quality of the researchers, these were legitimate scientists and everything. They weren't necessarily all Air Force personnel.
Yeah,
but
a bunch of grunts in there.
Right, but the interesting part about this information was put out in Special Report number 14, which I have a copy of it sitting here. There's a lot of really valuable information that can be gleaned out of this thing. Out of these unknowns, there were 271 daylight discs, 29 radar visual sightings,
wow.
10 radar sightings, 46 close encounters of the first kind, 33 of the second kind, and 8 of the third kind.
Whoa.
So that begs the question, what is the threshold for concern? In other words, is 8 people that claim they, 8 high quality incidents of people claiming an encounter with beings, not lights in the sky, with beings.
That's right.
That this panel still said they could not come up with an explanation.
Yeah. So first kind is lights in the sky, right?
Right.
Second kind is a visible craft and maybe
physical trace.
Yeah. And then third kind is interaction with beings.
Close interaction, correct.
And fourth kind is like they take you to space or something like that, right? Isn't there a fourth kind? I'm serious.
You don't want to know about the sixth. All right, so while Bethel was conducting their investigation, the CIA got involved as well, and they organized their own study. It was called a Robertson panel. They hired physicist Howard P. Robertson to head this panel, and it was made up of several scientists. They met for a total of 12 hours of investigation over 3 days. They investigated 2,331 cases in 3 days. So suffice to say, it was a whitewash.
Yeah.
And their conclusions was that national security agencies should take immediate steps to strip the unidentified flying objects of their special status, of the special status they've been given, and the aura of mystery that they have unfortunately acquired. They're the ones that recommended that UFO organizations be infiltrated and UFO sightings should be discredited, and also that was going on at the same time that Project Stork was doing their top secret study. And there's a very interesting connection between those that we'll touch on in just a minute.
I mean, that could also be a plot to make the investigations go deeper into secrecy rather than actually, you know what I'm saying? This idea that they're going to, okay, let's discredit all of this stuff and this is not important. We're going to downgrade the status of all of this as a, like, you can imagine like the CIA doing this to something that they want to go further into the top secret.
Yeah.
Well, also keep in mind that this Robertson panel convened shortly after the Washington, D.C. flap, which created quite a bit of concern with the public. So, it's understandable that they were trying to douse the flames of fear that might have inspired. So I can understand. It seems to me that Bethel was conducting a real study while the Robertson panel was not. They had two completely different objectives.
Yeah. Were they both secret, or was it just the...
No, I don't believe the Robertson panel was secret.
Okay, so that was the one for public consumption, whereas the real study was going on in secret.
Right.
And it was the Robertson one that the Watcher is saying that's the one that suggested that it might overwhelm military communications?
Correct. They were saying that a foreign agency or foreign nations could use the UFO phenomenon to, cause mass panic or overwhelm the communication systems.
Right.
Yeah. Later, by the late 1960s, another panel was convened. It was called the Condon Committee. And it was, for the most part, done to give the Air Force an excuse to shut down Project Blue Book.
Right.
We now know that, since 2017, information was brought out by the New York Times that there were other studies being done in secret, ATIP and all. But bottom line, we had from the establishment of Project Sign in 1948 through 1969 with Blue Book, you had them go through all these, different panels and all to do investigation of these sightings. But all of that may not have accounted for much because of something that was uncovered later. It was called, they refer to it as the Bollinger Memo. This was a document that was a secret document. It's dated December 20th, 1969, signed by Brigadier General Carl Bollinger. He was the Deputy Director of Development for the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And I'm going to quote just a segment of this, and it says, as early as 1953, the Robertson panel concluded that the evidence presented on unidentified flying objects showed no indications that the phenomenon constituted a direct physical threat to national security. It was interesting that they used the word physical threat. There still, however, is no evidence that Project Blue Book reports have served any intelligence function. Moreover, reports of unidentified flying objects which could affect national security are made in accordance with JANAP 146 or Air Force Manual 55-11 and are not part of the Blue Book system.
What does that mean?
In other words, the best reports, the ones that could be construed as having national security importance, were never forwarded
to Blue Book. Oh my God!
So, in spite of the fact that 23% of the reports that were forwarded were found to be unexplainable, the best sightings they never saw.
Oh God, man!
It sounds like you just have multiple different objectives in bureaucracies. I mean, this sounds very familiar to me.
Yeah.
Like one objective is, hey, let's catalog all of these things, right, that are happening and study them. Another objective is, hey, let's look for things that are a threat to national security. And then within that, they say, well, some of these need to be top secret and some of them we can release to the public because there's more than one objective even in looking at things that are a threat to national security.
Yeah.
So you have this type of thing happen within bureaucracies because there's there's basically never any single person who understands all of the things, the full scope of what's going on within the bureaucracy itself, right? Every person is allocated a specific task. And then reports have to move up this ladder, and then they're given certain classifications. And so across bureaucracies, you see this tendency to not share information due to protocols that are built in to the specific bureaucracy for reasons completely unrelated to the desires of the other bureaucracy that's trying to do this. You see what I'm saying?
We saw that after 9/11, that we found that one of the big failings is that there were no
they weren't talking to each other. Yeah.
Interagency communications. So the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing.
Exactly.
They're both kind of studying the same thing, but they're taking different approaches.
And if you like, for me, I'm trying to put myself in the mind of somebody that's high up in the military, that's looking at the possibility of threats, what that could mean in terms of national security, and they're not thinking about whatever the heck this other project Blue Book is, but they get this thing and they're like, okay, slap this. This remains within, you know what I'm saying? So it ends up inadvertently, and I could say maybe there was a conspiracy involved, but it seems to me plausible that this could be an inadvertent cause for the reason why the most important ones were withheld from this other system that's trying to catalog everything and find out.
Yeah, there can be, all it takes is for the details of the case to involve top secret stuff.
Yeah.
Like something affects some base with top secret equipment in it. You can't release that information to a public committee.
Right. You have this compartmentalized information.
Yes.
And this we're going to get into a different aspect of this that I think might somewhat explain this in a sense, in that it is quite possible that due to that compartmentalization, there were certain individuals within the Pentagon who were more in the know about the real details, and others that were being fed the information they wanted to hear, probably. Yeah. And they have been completely unaware of the facts, the real facts.
Right.
So we discussed how the Bethel Memorial Institute was contracted to do their study, Project Stork.
Yeah.
Well, in 1992, a former employee of Bethel that also worked for the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, Dr. Irena Scott, confessed. Actually, she relayed a confession to MUFON from an individual named Elroy Center, a senior research chemist in material science for Bethel from 1939 to 1957. Center passed away in 1991, but in June of 1960, he confided that while working at Bethel, he provided technical assistance and evaluation for unknown materials that he was told were retrieved from crashed flying saucers.
Whoa. He
added that the debris was highly unusual and featured hieroglyphic-like markings.
Oh, man.
Center's family confirmed that he had a lifelong interest in UFOs, including while working at Bethel. That's all fine and dandy. It's just another anecdotal story. We've heard dozens upon dozens, hundreds, thousands. Right. But, okay. In an interview in 1990, General Arthur Exon, who was in 1947 lieutenant colonel at Wright Field, which is Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, he made statements regarding material allegedly recovered at the UFO crash in Roswell. He stated that, quote, "It was a shape of some kind. You could grab an end and bend it, and it would come right back.
Oh, yeah.
It was flexible to a degree. I think it had full range testing. Everything from chemical analysis, stress tests, compression tests, flexing. It was brought into our material evaluation labs. I don't know how it arrived, but the boys who tested it said it was very unusual. I don't know at the time if it was titanium or some other metal, or if it was something they knew about, but the processing was something different." So this is yet another anecdotal story. This is somebody credible that would have been in a position to have known of such things, but again, nothing to support his statement, other than it matched descriptions given by other Roswell witnesses.
I remember I remember the description of it
so
being like a memory material.
Right. So here's where it gets interesting. 19 years later, in August of 2009, a journalist named Billy Cox obtained through the Freedom of Information Act information that in the months following the crash at Roswell, Bethel Memorial Institute conducted, quote, research and development on titanium alloys for the Air Force. Huh. This was completely unknown. This was prior to Project Stork. But not, so they did this study on titanium alloys, but not just any titanium alloys, specifically nickel titanium shape memory metals. Ah. And who was the co-author of that report obtained under the Freedom of Information Act? At Elroy Center, the individual who claimed to have worked at Bethel on crashed UFO. Okay. Furthermore, General Exxon claimed that the material had undergone chemical analysis. Center was a chemical analyst.
That's right. Yep.
And his section of the Bethel report, titled "Analytical Methods for Titanium-Based Alloys," detailed chemical analysis to detect the quality impurities of material used for shape metal applications. For this project, Center worked under head metallurgist Dr. Howard Cross, who was in charge of the shape metal program. In his book Forbidden Science, Jack Vallée revealed that while researching Allen Hynek's Blue Book files, he discovered a top-secret document titled that he refers to as the Pentacle Memo. I'm sorry, here we go. Yeah. Stumbling over my words.
It's all right. The Pentacle Memo.
Right, Pentacle. Not Pinnacle, Pentacle. Okay. It was dated January 9th, 1953. It was sent from Bethel to Colonel Miles Gall at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Colonel Gall was chief of analysis for T2, which was provided technical intelligence of recovered enemy aircraft technologies. Vallée placed great emphasis on the memorandum's significance, stating, quote, "This recommendation is based." The letter states, "This recommendation is based on our experience to date in analyzing several thousands of reports on the subject of UFOs. Our representatives strongly recommend that a scientific panel not be set up until the results of our analysis of the sighting reports collected by ATIC are available. Since the meeting of the panel is now definitely scheduled, we feel that agreement between Project Stork and ATIC should be reached as to what can and what cannot be discussed at the meeting in Washington." So what's going on there is Bethel, operating on a secret program, is communicating with the Air Force and telling them that they do not think that the CIA should be allowed to conduct their own investigation. And since they can't stop it, they want to make sure that the Air Force does not relay certain information to the panel.
Wow.
What do you think the significance of that is? I mean,
well, first of all, they're saying Bethel is saying that they've already studied thousands of reports.
Yeah.
And Vallée goes on to say, he's quoting here, the storm team reacted with fury when Hynek went back to Bethel in 1967, demanding to know the truth. The man I have called Pentacle snatched the notes away from him and told him in no uncertain terms that the contents of the memo were not to be discussed under any circumstances. Yeah. So you have an individual, the author of the document, of the Pentacle memo, that is telling the Air Force not to divulge certain information to the CIA. When Hynek found out about that and confronted him, the guy was infuriated and ripped the memo out of his hand. The author of that memo was Dr. Howard Cross.
What?
Elroy Center's boss.
Oh, God. Wow.
It proves not only was Bethel working on a secret project on shape metal memories, or shape memory metal.
Yeah.
Howard Cross was in charge of Project Stork.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting coincidence right there.
So that's what we have thought is that there are secret programs going on in the background that are looking at this stuff seriously, and for whatever reason, they are very protective of the data.
Right. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base sponsored technical studies of memory metal, and in 1949 on nickel titanium alloys. These were used to create an alloy called nitol, which is the premier memory metal on the planet. The fact that the 1949 report referenced shape metal alloys. Let's see here.
So basically what we're talking about here is that that the idea of back engineering,
reverse engineering,
right? It's I guess the point here is that it seems like an extreme coincidence that immediately following the alleged Roswell crash, a researcher working at Bethel claims that he was working on crash recovery material on shape metal or memory metal.
Yeah.
And his boss was in charge of the UFO study at Bethel.
Right. And the author of the Pentacle memo.
Document. He was also responsible for Special Report number 14. It just seems like a lot of coincidences going on there.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, the ones that patented, the organization that patented the nitol, this shape memory metal, was the U.S. Navy. Who is now the one talking about being in possession of
crash materials. That's right.
So we've kind of gone full circle here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, like, this has never, I've not really looked into this topic. Russ has, come down from his tower and, yelled about it for many nights. But it's never been something that I've really tried to look into myself. And so trying to, obviously Russ is familiar with a lot of these names and stuff. So you're dropping all these names, and this is all new to me. So it's hard. I'm going to have to listen to this episode multiple times.
Well, this is, I guess you could say this has been sort of an esoteric conversation in terms of the finer details of the governmental handling of
we're still in the history,
sightings. Right. We haven't touched on the actual sightings themselves, really. Some of those might convince you a little more than this.
Well, I don't know. So I guess I'm coming out of left field here because I've heard a lot of the sightings.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I've seen documentaries about sightings, and we've talked a lot about different sightings and stuff. Those types of details, for me, the anecdotal stuff is interesting, but it's one of those things, a lot like the missing 411. I don't know what to do with it. I'm just kind of like,
let me throw.
Okay, that's cool. But the history of like these government agencies trying to deal with all of this stuff, and that honestly to me is more convincing. You know what I'm saying? That
it's the more tangible aspect of the phenomenon.
It is. Yeah, exactly. It's like,
if you end up with some awesome memory metal, it's tangible.
Well, not only that, but the fact that the weird aspect of all of these top secret people, or people that deal with top secret information, like struggling with the handling of all of the information and trying to block it and do all that. That kind of lends legitimacy to it.
Yeah.
Watcher has a good point there. Why would they go out of their way to hide something?
Yeah.
Exactly.
If there was nothing to it.
Yeah.
There was a lot of machinations going on.
Oh, man. See, that's classic conspiracy right there. The fact that they're hiding the information is proof that the information is real.
Well, that could be a psyop too.
Yeah,
I'm just giving you shit.
That's the other thing that on the surface of it, all of this recent stuff that's going on with the Freedom of Information Act things, and now it's like kind of all this stuff in the New York Times. Looking at it through the lens of the article that you sent that was the Life magazine, it's kind of like, okay, is this just
the next
cycle of PSYOP? Right.
Yeah.
Well,
so going into those details where you have, this stuff happened so long ago and nobody knew about it.
But it's layers of PSYOP. That's the thing, is you have a report that could be construed as being somewhat damaging to the Air Force's position because it's really counter to what their official position was.
Yeah.
But then we come to find out it was inspired by the Air Force.
Yeah.
So that even makes it seem like a PSYOP because now they're sending out conflicting information.
Yeah. Or that seems like you were implying in the beginning that there's two factions on the UFO subject in the intelligence and military communities, period. And they've been fighting each other through the bureaucracies. There's the one side that's like they want to downplay it, they want to dismiss it, they want the public to think it's bullcrap. And then there's the other side that's like, no, there's something serious here and we really need to study it. And these two have been fighting a media battle and a bureaucracy battle this whole time. And that's what we're seeing in these conflicting reports and studies and groups and panels.
And legitimately, the faction that was anti-saucer, phenomenon might not have been privy to the information. They might have been being kept in the dark. It would seem this is now I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat.
All right. Finally getting down to business here.
But it's possible, I guess, in all these different scenarios that could be, drawn from this. It would seem that it was the actual Air Force that inspired the thought that this might be something that's extraterrestrial in origin.
Yeah.
Maybe that was the PSYOP.
Right.
Maybe they've known that it was not extraterrestrial. That was the more palatable
The
excuse.
extraterrestrial hypothesis is the more palatable answer
Right.
than what it really is.
In other words, take for example, unlikely scenarios like Bob Lazar.
Yeah.
The big thing with Bob Lazar, he had a lot of really valid information.
Yeah.
And,
But he was friends
over
with-
time, a lot of the outlandish things he was saying have more or less proven to be true.
Yeah.
Not everything, but
Right.
a certain degree of it. And, of course, all good disinformation contains a certain percentage of
Yes.
legitimate information,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
But the fact that he was friends with known, researchers
Like
of
Lear.
UFOs, right? Yeah, and then it being introduced to George Knapp and all, it seems like an unlikely scenario, right? And
You mean the scenario of them hiring him, knowing he had those associations?
Correct. I mean,
Okay,
they had to do background checks, right?
Yeah. You're right. That it seems like they picked him.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's then shown this stuff and told that
It's
it's aliens, right?
Yeah.
Again, that sort of, doesn't it seem like maybe he was being led in the wrong direction on
Yeah.
purpose?
Right,
Or
yeah.
it's conceivable that he's being fed this information.
That he's telling the truth of
right.
what he knows.
He's just relaying what he was told.
Right.
That doesn't mean it was true.
Right.
He was just part of the deception.
He's not lying, but somebody did.
Right. If
Yes.
you're part of the PSYOP, it's very unlikely you're going to recognize that you're the mouse in the maze.
That's right. Yeah.
And why would they do this to, like, so if I'm thinking of the again, there's like a conflict between the people in government that would be considering national security and the ones that are just purely interested in what's going on. Again, there's like a conflict there. So it's like if certain people think we want our enemies to think that this is, that we're not developing this tech or this tech, whatever it is, they may take somebody like Bob Lazar and try to say that it's alien tech, or they're trying to hype it for enemies to think that we have found something out of this world as opposed to I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to come up with some.
That's one possible scenario. Another scenario could be that's more the excuse, but not, or it's not necessarily. I guess let me put it this way: they may not have been lying when they say that they do not pose a direct physical threat. Underline the word physical.
Because there's like...
the threat isn't physical. There's a threat. It's just not physical.
Yeah.
Now, that's a paradoxical statement because, we had a lot of conversation before this.
Yeah.
And one of the issues that came up is, and I sound like I'm contradicting myself constantly, but it's because it's that complicated. There's no simple answer. This would have been figured out a long time ago. But let's, for a moment, speculate on the fact that this is not something physical, right? That this is something interdimensional, time traveler. It's not a physical threat, right? It's not the entities or the craft or whatever it is they don't represent something physical.
They're not going to show up and blow us up.
However, the fact that there's evidence that there may have been crash wreckage and the radar data and all these other things suggest technology, physical technology.
Yeah.
So then that would mean that these other entities, whether they're interdimensional or time travelers or whatever, have to use technology to access our realm.
Yep.
Which, how does a non-physical, I don't know, how does a non-physical being create a physical technology?
Yeah.
In order, right? In order, it's a very complicated scenario to think of. Yeah. Then again, I'm going to go back to the deception thing. That maybe these high strangeness cases might be part of the deception. I mentioned certain things that the Air Force threw out. There were cases that they considered too weird to even include in their reports. And one in particular that pops to mind was an incident where there was two brothers in a home. They were listening to the radio, and this was in the 50s. They hear or they feel this vibration. They hear this loud buzzing sound, and all of a sudden the radio goes to static, and they see bright lights coming through the window. They run out to their porch, and there's this craft flying very low over the house, and it makes 3 or 4 passes at low altitude over the home. And they would see the object coming, it would pass over the home, and as soon as it got past them, it would disappear and the sound would go away. They could only hear it when they could see it. And it did this like 4 times. The Air Force said that makes no sense. That's not possible. And they just tossed it.
Yeah.
So, there are aspects, craft appearing and disappearing. Those things are still happening now.
Yeah.
Some of that disappearing thing might be, they're not just appearing, it's just that they move so fast, they seem like they disappeared.
Yeah, and anything moving that fast through an atmosphere should make an enormous noise, and so they must have some way of moving that doesn't require them moving through the air and leaving a big hole, right? In the air.
There's no sonic booms.
Yeah.
Or, right. No.
Because a big craft that just passed over your house that moved fast, so fast away from your house that it disappeared, should pull you and the entire house and trees up into the air after it, because it would leave this vacuum behind.
Yeah.
That's one of the big mysteries related to the Hudson Valley sightings, like you were discussing in the last episode.
Yeah.
You hear about that, the massive 200-300 foot triangles hovering at low altitude over the Taconic Highway, and over homes. They were very often seen over bodies of water, just hovering right over the water and all. But there are many reports where the objects would just literally be in front of them, and in a split second they'd be on the horizon, and then a split second later they'd be back. Whoa. So they were making these instantaneous jumps in the sky. There's many reports of that. There's another interesting aspect of that, because I know
we got to take a break, so let's not. We'll get into that afterwards. But yeah, I think it seems like a projection when you're talking about it in that way. Like somebody from some other realm is trying to project something here, and sometimes the target's lost, and it's like,
Then you have,
that's a good one.
Other unexplainable things like, a lot of the sightings of the disc-shaped objects, the observers will report that they seem unstable.
Yep.
They have the
like
falling
a
leaf,
yeah,
falling leaf, motion, and
Kenneth Arnold said it looked like they were skipping.
Right, they were skipping like saucers on the water.
Yeah.
What he saw were actually crescent shapes.
Crescent shapes, yeah.
But the media picked up on the
saucer part,
thing, yeah. But it's interesting that right after people started seeing saucers,
disc shapes,
so, again, it's this perception thing. Although triangular shaped UFOs go back at least to the 1800s. There are many, many sightings of the. So just because certain ones were being reported by the media didn't mean that, keep in mind back then, it's not like today that, somebody puts something on the wire and it's everywhere.
Right.
It's back then. A report might have made a local paper. 200 or 300 people read it, and it was gone. And there are a lot of researchers that are scouring old newspapers for articles, and they're finding more and more constantly.
Yeah. Same thing with the disappearances. It's the same way. They get the really weird ones get reported locally, and they don't go anywhere after that.
And that's another thing that Hynek points out in his book regarding the Blue Book era. He says that very few of the high strangeness cases ever made it to Blue Book, because the frontline researchers or investigators, which would have been like the local police, would say, "Oh, we would never report that." Like they'd hear somebody with some outlandish story, right, and they would just forget it.
You're crazy.
This guy's, right,
you've been drinking too much. Go home. Yeah, walk it off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And as we discussed earlier, those high strangeness cases might be the key to all this. In other words, that unexplainable motion or actions that these people describe might be the missing pieces that we need to formulate some type of a cohesive picture.
Right. You need all the data. I totally agree.
Right.
I mean,
you can't exclude the things you don't agree with.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. All right. Let's take a break. We'll come back for the final section. Everybody's lying to us.
I figured it out. Pyramids are cargo cult giant triangles. That's what it is.
Mystery solved.
X mystery. That's right, and we are back for the final segment of the final hour of the fastest 2.5 hours in podcasting.
Yep, going long, folks.
Going long. And yeah, I just want to say that from a guy who has never done a deep dive into this subject, like the history of it has really piqued my interest in a way that I have never been. Like now I have that drive that I feel it's like, oh man, I need to dig. I need to start digging into this rabbit hole. Yeah. So that's really cool. I appreciate that.
Good job.
Yeah, great job, man.
For years, I come down here, obviously, and I've been telling him all the wrong stuff.
Yeah, I guess that is. I mean, that's the anecdotal sort of case studies are not. I have the same problem with the 411 stuff.
Yeah,
it's interesting, but it doesn't really grab me in the way you've presented the information today, even though it was like hard for me to follow the names of the different people and stuff. Like you'd look up with this like look on your face. It was like, this is incredibly significant. And I'm like, I don't remember that guy's name. But yeah, the between segment conversations we've been having, with you kind of us hashing it out and it is just giving me a better understanding. It's really cool. So I think one of the things in our conversations during the day when we were hanging out that you kept pushing was, this is not necessarily a nuts and bolts phenomenon. And so there is a consciousness aspect to it. There's a metaphysical aspect, as you said, possibly interdimensional. And one of the ways that I look at that type of situation is no matter what, if there's any type of apparition or appearance or light or something, as long as it's not completely coming from within a person's mind, there has to be an interaction in the physical world. So, and we were talking about this during the break, and I kind of think of like, if there is a non-physical realm, we would say non-physical because whatever their laws that govern their universe are not the same as ours. And so it looks like they don't have stuff and things to deal with. And, their technology may be a completely different type of thing because they don't have matter and they don't have all the same rules. But if they developed a type of technology that allowed them to cross into our universe, even if it's in combination with our consciousnesses and the, what did you call it? The co-creation type of thing.
Yeah.
That
there is a physical interaction.
Yes. So their ability to cross over here requires that they have some type of, there be some type of interaction between what is the fundamental makeup of our universe and whatever technology they have. So like one of the ideas that I was talking about during the break is that some strange metal that's bendable and is unrecognizable to material scientists may just come into being from the energy and matter in the area of where they came into our universe. Like this thing could just basically be
the nature of their tech basically generates some kind
build stuff over here out of our universe's stuff.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, and there's so many aspects to this thing. You just touched on something that popped into my mind. We talk about this possibly being non-extraterrestrial, right? We're talking about these interdimensional, or time being a dimension. A time traveler would still be interdimensional, but crash retrieval material. There was an incident in 1953 in Ubatuba, Brazil, and there was material recovered that was 99.88% pure magnesium.
Yeah.
That would have been virtually impossible to produce on this planet at that time. In subsequent years, it could have been done. It would have been extremely difficult, and it would have taken special facilities to be a very select few could have done it. And the fact that this happened in, Brazil makes that highly unlikely that it was a hoax perpetrated by somebody. So in other words, this is, it's part of the periodic table. It's not some magical material that doesn't exist in our realm. It's an actual metal that we're aware of, but we couldn't produce it here at that time. Right. So that lends to the suggestion that it's extraterrestrial, because there are other planets where that would be much more, planets with, let's say, higher gravity that could have made producing such a material easier.
Yeah.
Naturally. Of course, they could have been manufactured, which then that throws a wrench in that theory. And bottom line, here's the other thing that we talked about during the break, is that we're trying to take all of these different phenomena, plural, and trying to lump it into one thing, like this is what it is. Well, we may be trying to fit pieces together that don't go together. We've got two different model cars, and we're trying to shove all the parts in to create one car out of two different ones.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
There is no doubt that certain percentage of these cases are military technology.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible that a certain percentage are non-physical, and another part could be extraterrestrial. Or that may be why we can't get to the bottom of it, because we're trying to find one answer.
But let's say that some of this is extraterrestrial, and that some of it is non-physical. Well, the extraterrestrials would also have encounters with the non-physical aspect, probably. Right? On wherever they live, they are probably having and have had for thousands of years encounters with the non-physical aspect.
Yeah,
and maybe
here in ships.
Maybe their bureaucracies work a little better than ours do, and they were like, "Hey, let's check this out." And so they're utilizing some of that understanding.
I hate to bring up things that are this fringe, but some people have reported observing different forms of entities. You've got your Nordics, which are the blonde-haired, human-looking,
tall whites,
entities, right?
Grays.
You've got the grays. There's different grays. There's the
tall
mantis,
grays and the short
right?
grays,
The tall mantis, the short. Those could be drones. It's hard to say, but there are various different types of entities that have been described. Again, one possibility is that it's manipulation of our perception, and there's nothing. What we're seeing is a construct of our own mind that they actually may not appear anything like what we perceive them to appear like. But the other possibility is maybe they are different species.
Yeah.
Maybe some are from one place and they've existed long enough that they know that's just the way it is, and they're fully aware of these non-physical entities, and maybe they coexist. I mean, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
I don't know, but that's a great looking tinfoil business suit you're wearing.
This is
just level up from the hat there, buddy.
That's right. And I think that all the descriptions of the various entities could point to, like you said, that this isn't all one thing. And I think of the Fae, the fairy stuff. Like I know you talk about fringe. There's a fringe topic, but man, some of those encounters are so similar.
Floating entities.
That's right. Abductions. They move in circles. Lights in the woods. I mean,
time travel.
They move. They travel through walls and things like that. So.
And they happen to be associated with magnetic anomalies and mounds.
Right. And buzzing sounds. There's a lot of the same high strangeness aspects that show up. And those, if you really look at that, those things they're from here, right? At least that's what the appearance is. They live here. They always have, but they're like shifted or something. I don't know how to say it right, but they're not quite all the way in our realm. But they are here all the time, But they're alien to us, nevertheless.
It's like I said, the more I learn, the less I know about this phenomenon. Because just as soon as you find some new piece of data, it only opens up 100 new questions.
Yeah. That's right.
We're not getting it realistically. We're not getting any closer to a solution. Although I will say this, Valet, I've heard him quote that although it may seem like we're not getting closer to a ultimate solution, he said he uses an analogy of comparing it to cancer. He goes, "We're not necessarily trying to cure cancer as one thing. We're trying to cure certain cancers, and one after another, you're getting closer and closer to being able to cure all of them." So he's looking at this as trying to solve certain facets of the phenomenon. Although
it's too complicated to try to solve as a whole. Yeah.
What would be nice though is if we could unify our questions, as a society, so you've got like what you just went through, the whole show about all these bureaucracies and all of the things they're trying to do and all of their motives, and then the public at large and all the different ways that people have been either led to believe or due to the way information has been disseminated, the way they think about it. It would be nice if we were all asking the same questions and seeking those answers. You see what I'm saying?
Well, just imagine. I mean,
that's pie in the sky.
We're sitting here speculating on all these different possibilities, right? And we're doing this with the benefit of 70 plus years of research or of data that's been accumulated to formulate these theories from. Imagine sitting in the Pentagon in 1947 and trying to have this conversation. They don't even have much of a basis to go on unless they have some form of tangible physical evidence.
Yeah.
And even then, just because you have a piece of material, that doesn't necessarily tell you where it came from, how it was manufactured, what their intent. I'm going to bring up one other aspect of this that I think is pretty important. The military's responsibility is to protect our country.
Yeah.
And whenever there are incursions of unknown objects into our airspace, it is their job to assume that it's hostile until proven otherwise.
That's right.
Right? They're not going to, go ahead and fly over that nuclear facility as long as you don't mess with it. No,
right.
They can't take that position.
No. Shoot first, shoot again, and then ask questions about the shooting.
Right. It's right. Yeah. So I don't see any obvious attempt to create a defense system to protect us from this type of
that
incursion.
is pretty strange.
So does that suggest that either it doesn't pose a threat, or is it that they already know there's nothing they can do about it anyway? Although I don't think that would be the case, because no matter what, you'd at least try.
Well, I have very little faith in bureaucracy to do kind of stuff like that. What I would assume that a bureaucracy would do is, if it came upon something that it completely couldn't understand, is it would say that it didn't exist. That's
what they did.
Yeah. Yeah. Rather than tangle with it, what you don't want is to try to be dealing with something that you can't understand. You've thrown all these scientists at it, and they're like, we don't know what this is, or this is something really weird. Then the best answer is to say, it isn't real. Everyone who says they see this is imagining it. That way we don't have to do anything about it.
But then you have like the military mind, which is, can we use that?
Yeah. Yeah. Can we use this to make things blow up?
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well,
like the pure defense of the country. Like, how do we use that to defend the country?
Yeah.
Well, the irony of this, we talked about this earlier. I pointed out that early on, talking 1947, immediately following Kenneth Arnold sighting, or if the Roswell crash actually occurred, the initial response was, we don't know what's going on, we're researching it.
Yeah.
Shortly after that, it changed, and they started trying to, write off sightings as military aircraft. They were using military technology to as an excuse for the sightings.
Yeah.
Possibly they took the whatever materials,
and there's an advantage,
and they used that to exploit the technology. And now we've reached a point where they're using UFO sightings to write off military technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's an advantage.
UFO sightings are still happening, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe they're using that. Maybe that's what's going on right now. In other words, the Navy is talking about Tic Tacs and physical material as to implant the idea that maybe they really are extraterrestrial craft
when it's actually
our own tech. Yeah. Although, here's the thing. That kind of psyop might work on the general population, but any, halfway, respectable adversary, take any of the other superpowers.
Yeah,
they're going to know exactly what's going on. They know more. They know far more about what our government's up to than what we do.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. That as long as your intelligence tells you that our enemies also don't know what's going on, there's an advantage to spinning it that it's our own military technology, right? But if you find out through intelligence that the other intelligence agencies of your adversaries have also found out what this really is, then it no longer serves you to spin it to your own public as our own technology. Now you need to move it out to say, well, we've got parts and we've discovered stuff and we're working on it. Because you know that your adversary also knows it's not ours and it's not theirs. And you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, the Senate hearings have kind of suggested that the Navy or our military is saying that they're concerned that this could be foreign tech, or that it could be alien or extraterrestrial or whatever from wherever, but that our adversaries might try to use or use that technology, try to glean information from that technology to use against us. So they're not really saying it. Honestly, I don't think. My initial reaction to the New York Times reports was, wow, I can't believe they're saying this. But the more I've thought about it, it's just more of the same story they've been feeding us. Just hadn't repeated it for a while.
That one you sent me, the second one, where they were saying, do we believe in UFOs, is the wrong question. In that one, they straight up state, like, no, they are saying this is definitely not adversarial technology, whatever it is.
Yeah, that is true. It does say that, but is that entirely different than what they said in the Life article? If it was generally, in other words, we know the Air Force was the one feeding Life the information.
Yeah,
and they're saying that this really legitimately could be extraterrestrial.
Yeah, yeah. So in this case, what they seem to be saying is that whatever it is, because they said in the article, they said this doesn't necessarily mean aliens. They said that, but it also is definitely not adversarial country technology.
It does not It does not originate in any foreign country or something.
Yeah, so that's why I start thinking of crypto-terrestrials or breakaway civilizations or something that is here.
It's sort of
Antarctica, bro.
Yeah. Or maybe they said it doesn't necessarily mean aliens because what they're trying to tell people is like, we don't know what this is. We have determined that it's not this and it's not this, but that doesn't mean it means aliens. We just know it's not Chinese, it's not Russian, whatever. Right.
That just seems so unlikely, but it's also would seem unlikely that they would actually acknowledge that they don't know after 70 years of studying it.
That's why I was bringing up because our intelligence agencies are constantly spying on the other intelligence agencies and what they know.
Yeah.
So once you find out that our adversaries have found out that it's not our tech, they now know the most top secret stuff that we know, that this is not from anything we know on the planet. Now we know that our adversaries also know that. Now we can't continue to put out this idea that we know what it is, or that it's our own tech or anything like that, right? Because they know it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they'll think we're fooled.
Yeah.
I would say the only thing you can be assured of is that they're not telling us everything they know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Everyone's lying to us, folks.
It's not. They're not being all of a sudden being completely.
The phenomena
honest.
is lying to us. The government's lying to us. Everything is lying to us.
It's all a conspiracy.
That's right.
I'm lying to myself. No, I'm not.
The Grand Watcher is flipping out right now.
It's cool, Grand Watcher.
But there is a document trail that shows that there was a conspiracy even within the government, even within the Pentagon.
Yeah.
There were conspiracies.
They were conspiring against
themselves. Yes,
that's classic. classic government crap right there. Oh man.
So we're planning to continue this conversation at some point.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of other areas we didn't touch on. There's a really interesting documentary that I kind of turned the guys on to that I thought was something we really need to talk about at some point, because it shows a completely different dimension of this phenomenon, something that we maybe kind of danced around it in this conversation, but we didn't really get into too much detail. And then there are a bunch of sightings that I pulled up as a result of last week's conversation, especially talking about like the Hudson Valley sightings. I think there is a sizable percentage of people that have heard about the Hudson Valley sightings and assume that they're military, some type of military tech. I was one of those. I was fairly convinced that it was some form of military technology. But as you start...
You thought the military had like football-sized triangles?
Well, you know...
Football field-sized triangles.
We really don't know what state-of-the-art technology is right now. We have an idea of what some might be.
Yeah.
But...
It's like Laird said, like, we have no idea. Like, they've gone way beyond what they've let us know.
That's where...
That was interesting.
Where cases like, you know, like the Tehran UFO in 1976, that one's a pretty good indicator of where our technology was at that time.
Tehran? Is that the one you're talking about? Yeah.
Yeah. In other words, we tried to rescue... I've got a lot of detail that I was going to cover, but we'll have to do that
we'll get into the
episode.
The next episode.
But bottom line, out of desperation in trying to rescue the hostages, we resorted to Wile E. Coyote tech, the Air Force attempted to strap 30 rockets on a C-130 aircraft because the only landing strip the only suitable place to land was a soccer stadium. So they wanted to be able to fly the C-130s in here.
Oh, the rockets were pointing the other way.
They had them both ways. They had 8 rockets pointed forward to decelerate. They'd load the hostages in, turn around, and then fire the rockets to accelerate to get out. Well, they did a couple of test flights, and then, of course, the first full power test failed spectacularly. And, that went down the tubes. And so did Carter's presidency. So it would seem to me that if we had the technology,
if we had our own flying saucers.
in 1976, if the craft that was having its way with the Iranian Air Force, and freezing their weapon systems and doing all this stuff, if we had it then, we would have used it 2 years later to extract the hostages.
Yeah, and that's a good argument to be made in a lot of cases. It's like if we have this tech and we've had it for so long, because this has been talked about, that they've either been reverse engineering stuff or they've been building all this stuff themselves and they have all this tech. Well, why don't they? What's the point of building all these things if you don't ever get to use them? Yeah,
and and like another, getting back on the Hudson Valley sightings, just because that one's pretty important because of the number of witnesses involved. We're talking somewhere upwards of 8,000 witnesses over, a 9-year period or so, or 6-year period. Some of the stranger aspects of that is the fact that there were inconsistencies regarding what was being observed. Some people would see this big V. Some people saw a check mark. Some people saw discs.
Yeah.
And it could have been relative to the position.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what I thought. But I have found reports of other sightings that described in detail not only the appearance, the checkmark aircraft, but the rotating in place, going back to the 50s. In other words, these individuals described the exact same thing that was seen in the Hudson Valley in the 80s.
Yeah.
And we know good and well there was no way we had that technology in the 50s.
Right.
Large craft that could just sit motionless in the sky and rotate and tumble on end. That's another not commonly reported aspect of the giant triangle sightings is that very often they're seen vertical.
Yeah.
The points are pointed down. In other words, and they'll just sit motionless like that. Like if there was a crew on board, how, that doesn't make sense.
And then it flattens out and you're like, wait, where's everyone standing? If there's people in there. Yeah.
And another little thing, I know that Linda mentioned sightings of rectangular craft.
Yeah.
That one, if I was going to bet on it, that one is most likely military. And I'll tell you why. I've mentioned to you guys, back in the 90s, I was an administrator of a forum for the Encounters television show, the Fox TV show, Encounters. There was a conspiracy forum. I was the administrator for that. And as a result, I would get a lot of people sending me private messages and giving me UFO reports, things they had seen. And most of them, they were interesting, but not necessarily anything that stood out in my mind. But there was one that I never forgot. And I had a guy that was out in the Mojave Desert. He was working on power lines. And he said he heard a couple of jets overhead and looked up, and he said, I saw what I can best describe as a flying door.
Wow.
He says it was the proportions of a door, very large, being escorted by 2 F-16s. He goes, I could hear the jets, and this thing, they were escorting it.
Yeah.
So that indicates it's most likely military. Well, as a result, I keep a very close watch for rectangle sightings.
Okay.
There's a website called the National UFO Reporting Center.
Yeah.
They list all these sightings. I did some statistics on that. They were like last year for 2019, there were 17.2 sightings per day in the United States.
Wow.
Just on that website, and figure that. I would venture to
only
bet
10% of people report or less.
In other words, exactly. How many people even know that website exists?
Yeah.
But there are quite a few rectangle sightings listed on there. I've also seen there's a website called or a YouTube channel called Suspect Sky.
Suspect Sky, yeah.
They had a very clear daylight footage clip of a rectangle, a black rectangle. It was amazing video, and I think most people would look at that and go, "That's
fake.
Got to be fake."
Yeah.
And I think it's legitimate video. But the interesting thing about that is that those particular sightings of that type of craft, there is a very high percentage of those are in the same area, and they're right out of Fort Worth. And Lockheed has a plant in Fort Worth.
What are they doing with giant flying doors?
Well, they're not aerodynamic shapes.
Yeah.
They're blunt-ended. Wouldn't seem like it's not a lifting body shape. And,
wouldn't seem? Is that what you're saying?
Well,
I see what you're doing there. Like a wooden door?
Well,
wouldn't seem? Come on, guy.
You're throwing me off track.
I'm sorry. Keep going.
They may be using there was a report back in the 90s in Aviation Week magazine. They were talking about that there are currently aircraft being tested that fly by principles that we do not fully understand. It's a very vague explanation of we have no idea what we're seeing. It's possible that they're using some type of fields, plasma fields or something to create aerodynamic shapes out of objects
air.
that do not appear to be aerodynamic.
Yeah.
So in other words, it may seem like, it must be anti-gravity, but it may not be. It's just using tech that we're not familiar with.
Yeah.
Okay. So pyramids can fly.
Yeah. Basically is what he's saying. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm in the tangent cube, so I'm going off on a tangent.
No, that's good. And I agree. Like there was something about that with what you said there sparked a memory in me about it's one of the stealth craft. That it has some strange field that happens on the tips.
The
forward.
B2,
yes.
The B2's claim to use, I believe it does. It uses some means of using like a plasma field to reduce to reduce
drag,
the drag and may also play
generate
into
some propulsion. Yeah.
Well, I don't know that I buy that aspect of it. I know it's talked about a lot, but I think it's probably more likely used to reduce its radar cross section.
Yeah.
I believe there were parts of that machine made right down the road from us, actually.
Really, I've seen one doing touch and goes. It was funny. I had my camera. I was out in Palmdale, and there was one doing touch and goes, and I immediately took my camera out to get pictures of it, and I could not figure out why my camera wouldn't focus on it. It's like, infrared. That would defeat the whole purpose for why it was designed.
So, final question: did you storm Area 51?
No, I don't. I do not believe that Area 51 has anything to do with aliens whatsoever.
Of course not. But I expected you to be there with your monster truck and your bicycle, trying to see them aliens.
I love riding out that direction, but no.
So you didn't practice Naruto running before? Okay, all right. I was trying to picture him doing the Naruto run, and I guess he didn't do it. Oh, well. Well, this has been great, man. Fantastic material. I know you got a bunch more notes, so we'll have to do follow-ups. So for everybody listening, we will be doing part 2 and part 3, or however many, until we get through all the material he's built, he's prepared. They won't necessarily be published in sequence because we'll just have to do them whenever we can. But eventually we will get it done. So thanks so much.
I'm looking forward to it, man.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, before I get out of here, I do want to do one thing. I want to give a shout out to the Snake Force. Because that's how I ended up here. Lou and Butt Flapperton, Jeff, Tony, Janice, Levi, Flavortown, Frank. I mean, those guys, they're so knowledgeable. Everybody has their own little niche that they know a lot about. And it's so educational. Every time I go in there, I come out of there learning something. So I encourage everybody to jump into the Discord. It's awesome.
There you go. Join the Discord, folks.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much, dude. Yeah. It has been amazing, the journey.
Yeah.
And everybody joining the Discord and all the stuff that comes about. This is really awesome.
Yep.
So
it was a pleasure being here.
All right, man. Thanks. All right,
looking
folks.
forward to next time.
That's right. You guys know all the website, email, and everything. Join the Patreon. Send us money.
We love you.
We always have. Good night, Adamu.
Snakes!
Tell him to get back to work.
Oh, yeah, I forgot.